Welcome back to the David Douglas Show. On today's episode, we'll be covering ramen, delving into the history of Japan and how the noodles arrived to the island, then looking at a corporate icon and how his creation of instant noodles spread ramen globally, then finally taking a look at current day Japan, how its various territories prepare ramen, how its most popular shops have a cult like following, and then looking at the few shops that have managed to achieve a Michelin star, creating one of Japan's most humble offerings. This is the David Douglas Show. If you're anything like myself, you view ramen kind of like sushi as this ancient Japanese creation that's been going on for years and years, hundreds, if not thousands of years, but it's simply not true. Ramen is only over a little bit more than 100 years old, its history in Japan and them making it. And its coming to the island is really a historical story that takes place in an insane time in Japan. The thing you got to realize at Japan is that in the 1800s, it was following an isolationist policy. They were not about people coming to the island. And it was just not their thing. They wanted to be left alone. They didn't want to trade. They didn't want to war with other countries. They were like, everyone else, stay out. You're not allowed in. You're not coming to hang out. We're here and we're doing our own thing. And ironically, the US was one of the first countries that made the people start going, we got to make a change. Because the US showed up with a big ship, scary, that was more technologically advanced than the ones the Japanese had. It was very intimidating. And they made them sign some agreements. They said, hey, why don't you take a look at this paper? I don't know the details of the agreement, but the people of Japan, specifically, I shouldn't say the people, the political parties of Japan, found that deeply embarrassing. They were like, these people just showed up and then just started demanding things that we just gave in. And at the time, they were ruled by a shogun, which kind of the coolest thing. But the shogun was overthrown. This political pressure came about. They weren't happy. They were embarrassed as a country, as a political ruling class. And they overthrew a feudal system and installed a more central government. These people came together, and this time was called the Meiji Restoration. It's a absolutely fascinating time in Japanese history because they went from having no outside contact to getting it slowly, then very quickly, kind of becoming westernized, changing their government style to be more central, getting all of these new things as they started opening their borders to kind of foreign influences. And with that came more trade with China and specifically noodles. And the word ramen comes from the Chinese word ramen with an L. Of course, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Which were hand-pulled noodles. And ramen isn't hand-pulled noodles. Ramen is traditionally cut noodles. And so they're different, but that's where the word comes from. And so the people started making noodles. They started whipping it up in Japan, having a great time. Lots of other crazy things happen at this time, by the way. I was reading the Wikipedia article, and it's just a huge, 40-year period of just massive change. But as people started making more noodles, in 1910, the first dedicated ramen shop opened. So you could say, when did really ramen start? People making it in their homes before that, for sure. But in some ways, you could mark the official start of ramen as 1910, which means it's only 114 years old. That's pretty crazy. People have almost lived that long. They have kind of. Is there anyone from 1910 still alive? Can you imagine being 114 years old? Oh my God. You'd be so tired all the time. Anyways, opened in 1910, but really what wound up spurring its popularization, ironically, was something terrible, World War II. And in the recovery of World War II, guess what Japan was getting from America? Because we kind of took them forcefully, I should say, under our wing. They started getting a lot of cheap wheat. I guess we were growing a lot of wheat. I think corn's our thing now. We'll have to do a corn episode. But at the time, wheat was our thing. And we were just like, guys, Take the wheat, take lots of wheat. And what did they do with the wheat? They made some noodles. And so it became this kind of staple product. It became this thing where, hey, we need food. We got to feed everybody. What's something we can do? We got this cheap wheat coming from the US. They're basically giving it away. Let's make something filling with it. Let's make some ramen. And I think the most important part of that is that it was a food that came out of necessity. It was a food for the people. And it was a food that to this day remains that way for the people. We'll talk about later how ramen has shaped up nowadays, but it's shockingly affordable. I mean, it shouldn't be shocking. It's a food that's known for its affordability, but for me, obviously the prices are different. This is like a burger in the US. You know, you can get a $2, $4 burger in the US. That's our ramen. Every country has their version of like, this is our not only our cheapest food, but our most widely available food. And ramen is super widely available. And it's super affordable. A lot of $4 bowls. God, a $4 bowl of ramen would kill. Gotta go to Japan. The other thing that really is in the history of ramen, which we're going to dive into, was the creation of instant ramen. Before that, all ramen was either freshly prepared, chop up the noodles, or frozen. And look, you might be saying to yourself, hey, frozen's got to last. Frozen you can do lots of stuff with, right? I have frozen noodles. Put yourself in 1950, though. We weren't as global. We weren't shipping as much refrigerated stuff. I'm sure it was possible to freeze stuff and ship it, but we just weren't doing it as much. So instant ramen, not having to be frozen, that's what really took ramen from a Japanese phenomenon to a global phenomenon. I will say, one thing to learn about instant ramen, it also made it more popular in Japan. So now is about time we look at the icon, and I say icon because when you see this picture of the guy who created instant noodles, and cup noodles, by the way, same guy, you're going to understand what I'm saying. His name is Momofuku Ando. There he is. Let's put him on the big screen because he deserves that. And if this ain't an icon, I don't know what is. Look at the sunglasses. Look at the aura he walks into the room with. Everyone else is clinking champagne glasses. What is he clinking? Cup noodle. The stories this guy must have. Dude, I want to hang out with Momofuku Ando. I believe he has since passed. God bless him. But I mean, the swagger you walk into a room with, knowing it's like that sketch. The way I think it's we're not going to go into what the sketch is, but he's going to it's a dirty sketch, comedy skit. But he can walk into a room and look at everyone, no matter how powerful they are, president of a country, supermodel, rap icon over here, and he knows growing up, they ate his cup noodles. They filled themselves up with sodium and carbs that he created. He knows it's not the best tasting thing, but all those powerful people, they all bowed before the cup noodle growing up. As did I, as did many Americans. So let's talk about this story. He was an entrepreneur, and what he realized was that if he could steam, season, and then flash fry noodles, they were shelf stable. All you had to do at that point was boil them up, maybe put in some seasonings, maybe put in some soy sauce, and you were good to go. Again, there's not that much freezing back then, and everyone else is doing fresh noodles. Those last a couple days. Think about how convenient this would have been. So there he goes. He winds up, getting it all around Japan, and then he also winds up shipping it internationally. And many people in the US, their first experience with ramen was an instant noodle, or more specifically, a cup noodle. I believe it was 58 that he started instant noodle. Could be wrong. It's either that or like the early 60s. Don't have the information right in front of me. But in 1971, he introduced cup noodle, which I gotta say, his introduction of cup noodle, I miss the days of marketing because now our marketing is like an Instagram ad. They put the Severance people in Times Square working. Actually, pretty cool. There's a billboard. Back then, you had like world fairs. And what he did was he set up shop and he gave everyone cup noodle with a fork because it was hard to eat with chopsticks. That's crazy. And then like by the end of the week, 20,000 cup noodles had been consumed and everyone was talking about it. That's why he's the cup noodle magnate. So in 1971, he introduces this into Japan. It starts spreading around. It's a kind of a luxury item at first, as was instant noodles, but it becomes cheaper over time. And in 1973, he brings it over. Actually, it might have been 1971 he brings it over, but he brings it over to the US. Does not advertise it as a Japanese product. There was a trend in the 70s, apparently, for Japanese companies to represent themselves not that Japanese, I guess. So he calls it cup noodle, cup o noodle, and it just looks like a good time. Let's pull up this little article I've got here about the history of cup noodles. We've messed up. We've gotten the tab to the wrong place. We figured it out. We're getting quicker with the production stuff. Let's look at this. A flash of inspiration. So the company Nissin Foods, which Momofuku started, was founded in 1948. And then look at him. There he is. It becomes a filler meal. I can't read this. Oh, here's the picture of all the people after the fair. They were all walking around with their cup noodles. This is a picture of a cup noodle igloo that small children are going through a track of train on. I don't know what's going on there. Here's the part I was trying to get to. Cup noodles hides its Japanese roots. The product took a different path in the US by downplaying foreignness and fashion and becoming an ordinary American food. Cup noodle was first sold in the United States in 1973. Pronounced cup of noodles, radon lean cup noodles. And it had shorter noodles that could be eaten with a spoon and fewer flavors than those opened in Japan. They opened a factory in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they started pumping it out. Now it's in 80 countries, 50 billion units sold worldwide in 2021. And what a global success it was. I think most Americans' first experience with ramen, you got to remember, when we were growing up, ramen shops weren't as popular, especially if you grew up in a small town like myself, which is a small town boy. Now I sound like a politician. Anytime I hear myself say I'm from a small town, I feel like I'm a politician trying to sell you something in Iowa. I feel like I'm in Des Moines, being like, I'm just a small town boy. I didn't know what this fancy dancy ramen was. I was just eating my cup noodle. That's all we could afford. Small town. We were fine. We had an upper middle class living. Okay? Look, I'm doing this for a living. The odds that I came from really hard times, lower. Not impossible, but lower. Okay? Privilege past. But most of our first experiences with cup noodle, we weren't spending a lot on food despite my middle class upbringing. Again, now I feel like I'm just selling you. This is why I don't talk about my personal life. Because I feel like a politician in Des Moines, Iowa, trying to get your vote. I'm not. The only thing I'm selling here is knowledge. Our first experience with ramen was a cup noodle. And we didn't really know what we were getting into, but yeah, it became an American food. It was like Spam. It was like bologna. It was like a staple. It was just there. It was cheap. And you ate it when you were feeling sad. When you needed a salty surprise. It wasn't surprising. It always tasted the same. The little packet you'd put it in it. You'd take it on the go and you'd shovel it down because you were a kid and that's all you knew. And this played a large part in ramen kind of getting around the world. In more metropolitan parts of the world, like New York City, actual ramen shops started appearing. The first one in 1975 showed up. But I don't think most places in America had anything like in ramen until like the 2000s. I don't remember it being as popular. But it happened in New York, and in other cities it started popping up, LA, the West Coast. And in the later 1900s, what also wound up happening was Japanese culture in general in the 90s into the 2000s became very popular. Technology was taking off. Computers were associated with Japan. Japanese culture became its own phenomenon. Sushi also became its own phenomenon, became spreading. And alongside that, ramen also grew as a food in the global space. Different countries developed their own ramens. In Korea, for example, they have ramyun, which is a spicier version. In China, they have their own kind of version, which is, specifically Japanese style, but typically more Chinese ingredients and flavors. And it really got out and about. But let's bring it back to Japan now. I'm trying to squint my eyes to see the time I've been recording. Great. Fantastic. So it had this global spread. It went instant noodle. Never came back. It was still growing in Japan. And in Japan, it's a different thing. Whereas we have ramen shops now all over the country, Japan's had them for a long time. If the first one was in 1910. How many, you say? 23,000. 23,000 ramen shops are in Japan. By the way, I read an article that was about the amount that closed last year, which was 73, which to me feels like a pretty good number, but that was up from like 45 in 2023. So the jump was like 30, 40%, which a lot of people were up in arms about. And it's kind of interesting because I think the closest comparison for an American mind, or perhaps maybe just one that grew up in the Middle East, or not the Middle East, sorry, my family's from there, but who grew up in the Northeast, I associate it, I think the best analogy for an American is pizza in New York City. Pizza in New York City, people associate with a dollar slice used to be a thing. It's still kind of a thing. But even if you're not getting a slice for $1, people are expecting, hey, I'm going to be able to go get a slice for a couple bucks, get about my day, whether I'm between meals, need a quick lunch, late at night, hungover, whatever it is, I can go get a quick, warm slice. It's already been cooked. They just reheat it. And that's kind of the mentality people have around pizza. Now, there's tons of nice pizza shops as well. But they're kind of at their own thing. They have to separate themselves. And ramen shops in Japan, I think, are the same thing. There's nice ones. There's high-end version. There's ones that, we'll look at later that have earned international appraisal, Michelin stars. And a lot of times they do that through picking very specific ingredients, high-end ingredients. And people, they're fine with that. But at the same time, just like people are fine with high-end pizza in New York, a lot of people, though, maybe that's a once-in-a-while thing, they still associate ramen with an affordable, easy-to-get meal. And so that's one of the reasons why this kind of increase in ramen shops, they stated as a reason that more ramen shops had closed last year, was because there's kind of this mental barrier for customers and for owners where they associate ramen with being $1,000 or less. And for them, they're almost like, what are we doing if we're doing more than that, So there's pressure, and Japan is a culture with a lot of social pressures. There's pressure for them to keep the prices low because it's got this cultural association with being an affordable item. And at the same time, there's inflation. Prices are rising. And some owners, they won't do it. They won't raise the prices. Or if they do, they feel like they'll be alienated both socially, but also their customers won't want to pay more. And that can lead some to close down, whether they can't afford to or they're just mentally, I don't want to charge more, so I'd rather close down. Hospitality is a difficult industry. You'll hear me say it before. You'll hear me say it again. You don't need an excuse to leave hospitality. It's the greatest, but it's also the worst for many people. It's an intense living. You're doing that thing with the noodles where you're shaking it out. You ever see those videos? I'm shaking my hand now. For the audio listeners, I'm shaking my hand. They have these little baskets that they put the ramen in, and they have these giant pots of boiling water. So they're able to get an individual portion of noodles, hang them on the side of this larger pot, and then cook those. And then as they're done, they lift out just the kind of basket, almost like a little mini fry basket. And a lot of times what you'll see in the videos of people at ramen shops is they'll then take that basket and they kind of flick the excess water off onto the ground, which to me seems crazy because I just feel like that's hot water going everywhere. But obviously they're used to it. They're comfortable. They know not to do it when someone's walking by. But I just feel like the texture of your hands, you know that texture when you've been in the bath for too long and your hands are kind of that raisiny kind of moistness? I feel like if you're running a ramen shop and the prices are rising and things are looking bleak and you think your friends won't like you, and by friends I mean customers, if you raise your prices over 1,000 yen, $6.34, and you're looking at your hands with all that stress and they're just raisined out, they're just kind of shrivelly wivelly, you're like, let's call it a day, man. I got to be able to do something else. Let me retire. Let me get out of this business. Let me sell this to somebody. Let me close this down. But there's 23,000 ramen shops. The area that has the most is Tokyo, followed by Hokkaido, which we'll look at later. The beautiful northern region of Japan, known for its snowy hills and hot, delicious ramen. Prices range from about $4 to $8, with many under 1,000 yen, $6.34. And some of the top Michelin places I looked at, you can get like a $13 bowl, which to me is incredible because you're at the top spot here. You're at the place that is using the truffle oil, that is using the 2-year aged soy sauce, the special pork from the special farm where the pigs have been massaged, their hind legs have been massaged to make the ultimate piece of pork. And you're getting it for $13.50. I mean, that's pretty great. It's seen as a casual, everyday comfort food, and it's supposed to be affordable. Everyone sees it that way. And instant ramen is more popular than ever before. In 2023, 120 billion servings were eaten. That's so much instant ramen. Per capita, what do you think who eats the most? You'd think Japan. Nope, Korea. Gotcha. By the way, the Korean convenience store videos and Japanese convenience store videos, by the way. That's why they're eating so much instant ramen. Are you kidding me? It's like a playground. It's not like I got my one flavor of cup noodle. It's like Americans with sodas. It's like you have a colorful array. Let me use my production skills to pull up a example of one of these. I'm going to do Korean because they eat the most ramen per capita at 70 servings a year, by the way. That's the average. That means there are people eating 100 servings of instant ramen in Korea. So let's take a look at this here. Put it on the big screen. Big screen. I mean, look at these rows of ramens here. That's a small I need a full image. Okay, here we go. Deny. So they have just rows and rows and rows. A lot of times you can get additional things in the convenience store. So you can get hot water in the convenience store. You can make it right there. Or go back home. So no wonder they're eating. I mean, this is like literally a wonderland. What's so great about Korean convenience stores? Yeah. It's pretty baller what they're doing here. Oh, here we go. They have microwaves in the convenience store so you can actually heat up your instant ramen or your other dishes, which is pretty iconic. And I kind of wish we kind of started taking some notes from that. Apparently 7-Eleven is trying to take some notes from their Japan stores into the US. I saw that a couple weeks ago. Who knows if it happens? 74 servings per year in Korea at those beautiful convenience stores. So instant ramen is bigger than ever. Thousands of different variations. We're talking what type of noodle, what type of sauce, what type of toppings. The US, we have that a little. We have less of it though. It's available. You can get it, but it's not like in Asia. They have a wealth of options when it comes to instant ramen. And what we're going to get into next is how the different regions of Japan have been preparing their ramen at the high level, at the low level. And we're actually going to take a look at the map of Japan and kind of pop around, try to get an idea of the ramen sphere, as no one besides myself calls it. But before we get to that, we do have to take a quick message from our sponsors who supported the show. Today's episode of The David Douglas Show is brought to you by the advocates for the people that talk too much to waiters at restaurants. Advocates for people who talk too much to waiters at restaurants is a national advocacy group for the most annoying friend in your friend group who decides that the attention they didn't get from their parents, they are now going to force attention upon themselves. And they're going to look for the weakest links, the people that have to pay attention to them because it's their job as servers. And they're going to prey on those people, frankly. But the advocacy group, advocates for people who talk too much to waiters, they want you to know that as a group, they take no responsibility. As a group, they realize they're selfish people and they're going to do nothing about it. They are not going to therapy. They are not doing the work. They are texting you that they're flaking out on the plans. And you're happy because you don't have to hear them talk at dinner. Hey, so I know, and sorry about this, I know I asked about the burrata, but when it comes to the actual milk that was used in the burrata, is that from a grass-fed cow or what kind of cow is that? Do you know? No? Would the chef know? Maybe we could talk to him. And I'm happy to go back there. I'm happy to go back there myself. I don't want you to have to. I'm happy to go talk to myself. That's the thing. This class of people, they'll pretend that they are the saviors of the group, that they're learning information, that they're willing to go back to the kitchen. They're not the saviors, but they are the sponsors of today's episode, and we thank them for making this show possible and supporting the program. Thank you so much to the advocates of people who talk too much to waiters at restaurants. Welcome back. We are now taking a look at the various regions of Japan and how they prepare their ramen. I've made this nifty little map that's got 7 regions circled. And if we click on them, for example, Tokyo, what do we get to see? A couple pictures of Tokyo. The idea here is what we're going to get the ambiance of the place. We're going to get the vibe of the place. And then we're going to look at the ramen that they portray, that they create there. We're trying to associate, hey, what is going on in Japan? And how does that translate to their food? That's the goal of this segment. And we're also trying to get a kind of a map in our minds of this country here. So I could start with Tokyo, but I'm not. I'm going to start with Hokkaido because it's one of the most interesting regions. And I think it's the most clear example of how kind of the vibe of the place kind of gets distilled down into a bowl of food. So let's take a look at Hokkaido. Hokkaido is the most northern island of Japan, and this is what it's known for. Snowy hills, mountains that you can go skiing on. It's surrounded by water, as is all of Japan. And look at these towns that have mountains in the background. It's a cozy, cold place. The streets are lined with snow. The people are walking around. The summer is beautiful, but the winters are cold. There's no two ways about it. And so what kind of ramen comes out of a place that is an isolated island of snow? Let's take a look. This is Sapporo style ramen, which is one of the large cities in Hokkaido. And they are known for miso ramen, which is miso is a salty sensation. And these bowls are salty, umami, warm, and they're packed with things like corn, which it sounds good in the cold. You know that sounds delightful. It's usually got kind of an orangey color to it. We're on Reddit now. I mean, that looks delicious, if I do say so myself. And I'll be honest with you, all the bowls are going to be looking delicious. And miso ramen, we've probably had it here in the US. You've probably had this style of ramen. And now you know that it comes from this northern island of Japan. Another super popular type of ramen is from the Fukuoka. Let me say this correctly. Fukuoka. And let's take a look at this. This is the southern part of the island. A little bit warmer, per se, but very island vibes. They got lots of bridges. They got lots of cities with canals on them. It's a beautiful place to live. And I can't exactly figure out how that connects to this, but here's what they make. They make tonkatsu. Tonkatsu is this thick, creamy bowl that's very rich and very pork forward because they're simmering pork bones for hours to create a broth. You get all that collagen, all that extra fat, all that pork goodness gets simmered down into this milky broth, a rich broth. Look at these bamboo shoots, the yolky egg, and of course, a couple slices of pork, like most ramen bowls have. So if you've had tonkatsu, which you probably have, you can now know it's from this little southern tip of Japan. But what if you want something a little lighter? Well, let's go to Fukushima, halfway between Tokyo and the northern island we looked at before. And talk about a beautiful place. A gorgeous place. Mountains, grasslands, big lakes, imperial buildings. If you're not on the video version of the podcast, I highly recommend going over to Spotify or YouTube, just taking a glance when I am talking about interesting things like this. Not all the show is very visual, but this part is. And if you look at these landscapes, you're saying, this is a pretty relaxed life. Maybe I don't need all this extra fat, and maybe I don't need all this extra miso punch. So what do they have? They have a light soy sauce broth that's often made with sardines. Yum. And you can see in the color of this broth, it is like a soy sauce color. It's much darker. You can literally see this creaminess is gone compared to the tonkatsu. Replace that light, very almost cream color of the tonkatsu is now a dark, see-through soy broth that looks lighter. A lot of times it's made with dried sardines, and it's usually served with thicker, flatter noodles. Now, I don't know if these are thicker and flatter, but let's see if we can find thicker and flatter. Ooh, this one looks good. Oh, yeah. Oh, here you can see the thicker, flatter noodles. Look at that. Oh, my God. These almost look hand-pulled to me. And I kind of like the contrast of thicker noodles and a lighter sauce. I feel like that almost becomes more of a carb-forward situation. Instead of like half of the heaviness coming from the broth, you're almost like, this is almost like seasoned, like a light seasoned pasta. You know, it's like a pesto on a pasta. You know, it's more about the carbs and just getting that flavor onto there. And maybe that's what this bowl is all about. Now let's get to back to our map here. Let's zoom out once more. So far we've gone to the north, we've gone to the south, and now let's center in on Tokyo, where you can get the most types of ramen. Every type of ramen that we're covering in the show today, from the creamy broths to the soy broths, you can find in Tokyo. They're most known for their shoyu soy broth, which is a dark soy. And let's take a look at. I mean, it's kind of not kind of a metropolitan city. It is the cyber city. I mean, look at these skyscrapers of neon signs and advertisements. The hustle, the bustle, the people walking. You want that dark soy sauced base ramen. Let's take a look at that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yum. Simple, but yum. Ooh, the dark soy sauce. You're traversing the darkness of the city. It's neon light shining down, and you get this dark soy sauce bowl of ramen. Delicious. They're also known for tsukemen, which is a dipping noodle. It's a more modern take, and it's a really fun little experience here. You get a little bowl of noodles, and you get a side for dipping. All these first entries always come up as recipes, which I kind of hate. I kind of want to see the restaurants cooking it. But you can see here. I got to find a way to get this better. But you can see here the little ramen bowl on the side of sauce. Usually it's not usually, but sometimes it can be a little thicker. And you take the noodles, you lift them up into the little bowl, you eat them, you go back to the noodles, and so on and so forth. You don't mix, you dip. Which is a fun little interactive situation. And that is a very Tokyo thing as well. It started there and continues there. Now let's look back at our little map and let's go to the Wakayama style of ramen from the Kinki region. Freaks much? By the way, the answer is yes. If you have to ask the question, freaks much in Japan, the answer is absolutely. They are about the freaky, they are about the deaky, and they're about that life over there. There's some dark stuff in Japan. We're going to get into the solo eating ramen stations later, and that has some associations with other solo endeavors in Japan, if you know what I mean. Heyo, heyo. So what they do is they take the soy sauce style that you might see in Japan or other parts, and they mix it with the creamy tonkatsu broth. So you get kind of this 50-50, kind of the best of both worlds here. And you can see this, the color of this ramen is somewhere in between. And I really want to get to Japan and start kind of exploring all these different types of ramen. Because here in the US, you usually get tonkatsu, you often get a miso, and sometimes you can get a soy base, but you're not getting these mixtures of each one. You're not getting the subtle differences in the toppings and the flavors regionally. So that's what they're known in the Kinki region. Heyo. Now let's go to Hiroshima. Which, can I just say something about Hiroshima? Obviously a tragic history there. But do we have to make the... Oh. Okay, yeah. I was going to say, here's other types of pictures of Hiroshima, but then this is the thing you see when you look up Hiroshima. You just see this one building that's clearly been bombed out, and the frame of it's left, and it's like, okay, there's other things, though, which we're now seeing. There's old imperial castles, which would be beautiful. There's beautiful gardens. A historic part of Japan, and what type of ramen are they known for? They're known for onomichi style, which is a shoyu seafood broth. Shoyu is a type of soy sauce. And they mix that with seafood. And look at that. That looks delicious. Yeah, it's kind of a mid-colored bowl again. And I'm imagining the flavors are like... It's both the saltiness from the shoyu, but it's also the saltiness, kind of that seafood saltiness, that brininess. And I feel like it's almost more refreshing in a sense than other bowls of ramen, certainly than the creamy tonkatsu. But I want to experience that kind of like I'm not eating seafood exactly because they're known for putting pork back fat into this. So the back of the pig. And I just want to experience that. Like we're eating pork, but we're getting kind of the seafood brininess and the noodles. And I feel like ramen is all about that combination. And I am floundering to explain all these things because they are slight differences. And then finally, let's go to Shigoku. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? The Tokushima style ramens. What a lovely little area here. This is the Cali of Japan, I've decided, just because I see one pictures with palm trees. What is the Cali with Japan? They're crazy. They're wild with it. They're known for a pork broth and a raw egg topping it. And you can see in all these pictures. Boom, raw egg. That is very LA of them. That is very palm tree of them. I'm on a raw diet right now. I eat bowls of carbs. And I just pile that with raw eggs. It's a really beautiful diet. I used to be a juicer, but now I'm on a raw diet. God bless those people. God, I don't know if I'd survive in LA. I really don't know. I think the point I was trying to illustrate with that map is that Japan is a diverse country in terms of the regions have their own identities, you know, just like in the US, you know, the South's different than the North. The West Coast has its own thing. And you can get the same food all across the US, but prepared in different ways. You can get your burger 17,000 different ways in the US. And yeah, they all got meat and they all got cheese and they all got some sort of buns, and the variations aren't that big, but they are specific to their area. And the same thing with ramen. And I think it's harder for me to differentiate these kind of subtle differences because I don't know what the pork and the seafood bowl tastes like. I can't be like, oh, yeah. That's way different than the tonkatsu. I mean, I can say that in my mind, but I haven't experienced it. And I think that's the thing I like about this episode is that I'm like, ooh, I need to go to Japan and I need to devour every type of ramen. Now, if you can't get to every part of Japan, one thing you can do is you can go over to the Tokyo Ramen Street, which I can't tell if it's kind of a touristy thing or not. It's hard for me to tell. But certainly it's convenient if you're a tourist. But I'm sure Japanese people go, but I don't know if Japanese people kind of make fun of it like, yeah, the Ramen Street. That was horrific. But I've been talking a lot. It's going to happen. Let's take a look at this. I'm going to mute this video here. Put it on the big screen. I love putting things on the big screen. And so you're in a train station. This is kind of like you're in New York. One of the train stations is like this. I think Penn Station, you have like a Shake Shack that's between like stops. So you can be like, I'm going from the L train to the A train, but we're staying underground the whole time to get from the A to the L. And in between, there's going to be some restaurants. And that's what this looks like. It's like a long hallway, almost like a mall. This looks like a mall, but it's a subway station. And it's underground, and there's neon kind of lights, and there's these stalls that you can kind of go through. And as you pass by, they're all different things. Some of them aren't restaurants, but there's a section that has like 7 different ramen restaurants, and they serve different types of ramen. And you go in, you go through the little curtain, and you can get a different type of bowl at each. And I did find also a video of people kind of trying it, which I love this video. And this video we're unmuting because I love this guy. I found actually a couple of videos doing research of Japanese people speaking English, which I just am amazed by, because when was the last time you saw an American being like, hey, let's speak French and talk about French food, or speak French and talk about American food, which is what they're doing here. They're talking about Japanese food and they're speaking English.
In this video, I'll see all ramen on the Tokyo Ramen Street at Tokyo Station. Let's go.
God bless this man. He's happy. He's excited to show us ramen. The first one they have is a dried sardine ramen. Whoo. And this is giving, what is this giving? I'm learning. It's giving Tokushima, because I think that's a raw egg right there. So to me, that's giving Tokushima style right there. Incredible. It says Gyoku. I don't know if that's the name of the restaurant or what. I'm assuming it's the name of the restaurant. Here we can see.
This is special soy sauce ramen.
Hell yeah, it's special soy sauce ramen, dude. God bless you. You got the pieces of pork, and each of the pieces of pork are different. Some of them are thinner, some of them are thicker. And this one's a soy sauce ramen. It's giving Tokyo vibe. God, that looks good. And that's when you can really see that. It's like that dark soy sauce color, which is great. Here's one that's pork and chicken based.
Bonito.
Oh my
Ramen
God.
looks much thicker.
Woo! So this one has probably got pork and chicken bones in the broth. And this one, you see the pork is much thicker in this one. Oh God. That is absolutely beautiful. It's a thick, creamy broth. And it's got some of that tonkatsu, but then it's also got chicken in it. And then it's got the raw eggs. Wow. Not the raw eggs, sorry, jammy eggs. You can see a little bit's cooked on the outside as he's going through and trying all these places. This one is a salt-based ramen. Oh, yeah. So this is like a light broth that we're looking at here. It kind of looks like a chicken noodle soup type of broth. And I don't think I covered which region this is from, but I remember that this is another type. And this is like a really light broth. Yeah, the chicken noodly looking. Same toppings, some of the same toppings, the egg, the pork, but the sauce is totally different. And that hugely affects how you're eating it. Because if you're sipping down a lot of the broth and it's really rich, you're full in a second. And here's the classic tonkatsu, that creamy pork broth that's been simmered for hours. This is one of the heavier ones. Certainly when I have it in the US, it's heavy, it's sitting in you. Here's miso ramen. Where's that from? Say it with me now. Hokkaido. Dude, we are learning so much. Our brains are bursting with knowledge about ramen right now. Imagine having a conversation with your buddy about ramen this weekend, and he's like, oh yeah, I went to Ramen XYZ today. And you're like, oh, what'd you get? And he's like, tonkatsu. And you're like, oh yeah, Hokkaido style, right? And he goes, huh? Hokkaido? What? And you just start whipping out Hokkaido Fox. You know, the snowy region, the northern island of Japan, Hokkaido, where miso ramen's from. Don't you know? And he's like, what are you talking? You're going to seem so fucking cool. You're going to seem like the talk of the town. Whipping out your miso ramen knowledge. Ooh. I mean, here's the thing you could do. You could go around. Oh, here's the pork and seafood one. Where's that from? I can remember it. Oh, no. Oh, this is from Hiroshima. God, this place looks so cool. And you could go around and you could try every bowl. You could go take them one by one like this guy's doing and experience one. Or you could walk around and take your time. You could walk around each, collect a bowl from each. Maybe you can get them to go. I'm assuming you can get them to go. And then you could sit down with 7 or 8 different regions of the country. Maybe you've even got a map. Maybe you even place the bowls on a printout map of Japan. And then you're like, I mean, that's a cultural moment. That's what you do when you go to Japan. People talk about going to see the tourist site, but that's how you get an understanding of a country. You talk to locals and you make a printout of Japan and you put ramen bowls all over it. And it's like, yeah, you could get the instant gratification of just going to a place and having one of the bowls and having the next one until you're full. But sometimes it's better to go for a little bit of walk and delay that gratification until you got everything in front of you. Sometimes that's the best way to do it. Have a little map. I think I'm becoming a Japan tour guide. I'm coming up with great, genius ideas for how to experience Japanese culture. So that's the various regions of Japan. You can find a lot of them at that station, and they're all over the country, from the north miso to the pork bones in the south to the ramen that's soy style in Tokyo and the tsukemen dipping. I mean, the moral of the story is next time you go to a ramen shop, start asking questions. What part of the, start looking it up. What tsukemen? Look where that comes from. And you'll start getting a cooler understanding, and you can start noticing these subtle differences. I think that could be really fun. The next thing I want to talk about are the ramen chains of Japan. Ramen has got tons of local shops, but there are some chains that have become very popular. One is kind of seen as a tourist attraction, though still popular with Japanese people, and it's called Ichiran. And it's known, here's how I would describe it. It's known most for its solo ramen booths for little ramen freaks. Yeah. Because you can go in, sit at a booth, order by yourself, not even talk to anyone, push a little card over, and then minutes later, a bowl of ramen will be whoosh, a little whoosh. A curtain will be whipped across, and then a bowl of ramen will be placed, and then they will pull the curtain and then move on with their day. You barely even look at them. They don't talk to you, and you've got your own booth. You're sitting in your own booth, probably the same size of this desk, and you get your ramen that way. And that's kind of what made it take off, is it's kind of this novel experience if you're coming to the country. You can't do that here. We got to talk to somebody. We are the video sponsor, this episode's sponsor, people that like to talk to waiters too much. Japan, they have these solo experiences. They're also known for getting you their ramen bowls 15 seconds after they're prepared. And like I said, Japanese people, some of them, because it's such a large chain and it's kind of this novel experience for tourists, they kind of look at it as, hey, let's go to a local shop instead. But a lot of people still go in Japan and here. But the other thing that's so interesting about these solo ramen shops is they remind me the fact that you can go in, have your own little booth, like a private booth for ramen. It gives me the same vibe as Japanese internet cafes. Let's take a look at these. Let's take a look at this gentleman right here. I gotta find direct links to these pictures because it's annoying to have to go to the article. I don't like that. Open up image in a new tab. Here we are. This is an internet cafe where you get your own little solo booth. You get your own computer. You get your own access to, usually they have manga, sometimes adult manga is available. I mean, look at the wall. That is not, I mean, what is that? Yikes. But the darkest part of these internet cafes aren't that people are going to watch adult things on them and making marks on the wall, which is already creepy enough. The crazy part is that they have their own subculture where people can rent them overnight. And there's an entire class of people that are considered semi-homeless called net cafe refugees, where they rent out these extremely cheap booths that weren't really meant necessarily in the beginning to be for overnight, but they started offering that, and they have that as their where they sleep. That's their home, essentially. That they're kind of nomads that live in these 24-hour cafes that are cheaper than an actual bed because you don't even get a bed. You just get like a little mat you lie down on and you get a booth. They're sleeping in booths because it's some of the cheapest kind of quote-unquote housing. And then there's now even some of these internet cafes are kind of accommodating that style of customer, and they have showers and they have other things, but it's pretty dark when you think about it. I mean, so is generally being homeless, but it's kind of a flavor of being homeless where half of the people here have no job or are paid in low-paid temporary jobs, and they might stay over for $14 a night. So interesting. But that's what that ramen shop reminded me of, because you get your own little booth. And I wonder if the connection is there, or if people in Japan recognize it. So that's Ichiran. Next is Tenkai Pin, which has over 200 locations in Japan. For reference, Ichiran has 86 locations globally. They now have, I think, one in New York. And Tenkai Pin is known for its insanely creamy, thick broth that's known to be very divisive. People either love it or hate it. And if you look at it, what it looks like is almost like a gravy. Like, it looks like something you would kind of ladle onto mashed potatoes. Not as dark as like a traditional gravy you might see at Thanksgiving, but the texture, it's giving that. And for a lot of people, that becomes a mouthfeel that is like addicting to them. They're like, God, what is that? It's that extra creaminess and richness of it. It's kind of known for being so rich you can't even finish kind of drinking the broth.
I love. Oh,
And then here's what it looks like, and you can see kind of the creaminess. Which, by the way, I love this whole video. I have not watched the whole thing, but the guys in this video, after we look at this ramen, I'll jump to the beginning of the video. They're legends. But you can see that the creaminess in this. You're looking at a bowl of ramen that's covered in like what looks like a gravy.
oh, you love this? Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay, okay.
yes. This
I love
is
these
good,
guys so much.
Pork back, pork back, pork back.
I'm laughing. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing with them. They're literally laughing as well. I'm not laughing at this is an incredible effort to speak in English, but it is objectively funny to attempt something like this, to talk in a language you're not super familiar with, because you got to make it work, and they're making it work, and I love them for that.
This is.
I gotta start. I can't start talking like this. Obviously, I can't do that. That's not okay. But I wish I could assimilate into Japanese culture so I could hit him with the wow wows, Let's hear though. Let's get an instant replay on that one.
This is.
It's the double hit of it. Wow. I mean, I love it so much. In the beginning of this video, also, these guys are just iconic.
Hello. I'm King Bancho Furuichi.
Minowa.
And here is Japanese popular.
King Bancho! I love him. I love both of these young gentlemen right here. And literally shout out them.
Taste sunny.
Ramen tastes sunny. I mean,
Like sunny.
Like a sunny.
Yes,
Happy.
happy day. I mean, I love these guys so much. I think the effort they're putting into this content is like unbelievable. Like, I can't imagine doing this, and I just adore them for that. And then also I adore them for showing me the gravy like broth that we talked about at this place. And I do like that it's kind of divisive. I do like that people love it or hate it. I think that's like a fun little cultural moment where I wonder if people are kind of around the coolers of their offices being like kind of arguing about that, like, is it good or is it not? No, it's too much. I like this. I like that. It's kind of a fun little thing. But by far my favorite story of the chain is from an incredible write-up I got about a ramen chain called Ramen Jiro. This place is incredible. Everything about this place is so odd, so specific, that it only makes sense that it has developed a cult-like following. It couldn't be anything but a cult-like following, because if you enjoy this place, you enjoy such a specific experience. The experience I'm talking about, and I'll dive into all these details, but what happens when you go to Ramen Jiro is you get, first and foremost, a massive bowl of ramen, and you have to order in a specific way. They give you a moment to order. You have to know how, in what order to say the things, how to order more or less toppings, what size. You've got to be quick. All the people that work there are described in this article as soup Nazis. They're like intense people you got to order from. You get a huge bowl, and then you are supposed to eat in silence, and you are ostracized if you don't finish your bowl. They won't let you order the largest size because they know you can't finish it. The expectation is that it's your only meal of the day. You are supposed to prepare for your meal at Ramen Jiro by not eating the rest of the day, ordering quickly, eating in silence, a massive bowl of ramen, and then not eating the rest of the day. That is the experience. You're supposed to be there 5 to 15 minutes, polish off this huge bowl. Let's look at this thing. This is incredible. I mean, this is incredible. They're serving these piles of food, and these are the extra things you can get. You can get like the extra eggs, the extra cabbage, the extra garlic, the extra pork. Some of the toppings are free. There's 4 free toppings. They ask you about them. You have to be able to know how to order them. I mean, this write-up is incredible. I'll pull up the write-up here if anyone wants to look at it. On Ramen Beast, Ramen Jiro, Japan's most infamous food cult. And it describes the type of people that go there are known as Jiroans. And they have this ritual about you get your ticket, you are ready to order, you sit down, you leave quickly. And the stores, they don't look, I mean, look at these bowls of ramen. I mean, this is like insane. There's like 6 eggs on screen, a massive bowl of noodles, and then a separate bowl of broth and pork piled so high. I mean, all these bowls are literally overwhelmed with toppings. Like, I'm looking at a huge, like a size of pork that would take your entire male hand, or if you're not a guy, make your hand larger. It's a piece of pork that large. I've got to be able to think of a better way to describe this. It's the size of my head. It's the size of your head, the piece of pork. And it's overwhelming this bowl as it's kind of leaned up against this cabbage. Oh my God, look at these noodles. So many of them, and they just look hearty. And then they just pile the toppings. And then these are the kind of the guys who run the shop they're like mixing the bowls, they're throwing ingredients in, they're doing things sloppily. This place is known for not being super clean, kind of being a little grimy, kind of being a little dingy, and people love it. Their food safety's okay. The quality of the ingredients also, another thing, ramen and Japanese culture in general is like all about the ingredients, the quality of the ingredients. They use cheap ingredients. And they use them in large doses. They're not using the highest quality pork, but they're giving you a ton of it. And it's cheap and it's huge and it's incredible. And I love everything. I'm dying to go to Ramen Jiro. And there are people, because the ordering process is so specific and it's such a intense place to eat at, because you got to go quick. You got to know what you want. And they will ostracize you if you don't get it right. There are people who will give you tours. And they'll be like, I'll show you how to do it if you're coming in out of town. There's a guy who will give like Ramen Jiro tours. I want to be able to talk to him or just learn it online and then be able to do it myself personally. I don't want to handhold, but I want to be ready. Because they'll ask you what toppings, and you have to hit it with the phrases. So, for example, you can hit them with Zen Mashi Mashi, or double of all the extra toppings that you can get. By the way, you're not allowed to order that in your first go around. And if you order that and you don't finish it, you're banished. I just love everything about this place. They're like, it's like an insane, everything about it is insane and precise in an odd way. And that's why I think they have this following that's like, I'm a Jiroan. I go to this grimy shop. People are known for going in college, getting like a large bowl, and that being their meal of the day. That's how they afford, to eat. And then they have that kind of nostalgia factor when they're older. Maybe they can't get the large bowl anymore. That's they wrote about that in the article, but they still love going back and just getting this enormous, way too filling meal and kind of putting them back in that pattern that you were kind of forced to go in to eat at Ramen Jiro. Absolutely sensational stuff. And so let's go from the cheap piled on ramen to talk about the high-end ramen, the ramen stores that are putting in the extra special ingredients, that are taking an affordable food staple in Japan and trying to bring it to a point where it's high-end food. In 2016, the first ramen shop was able to earn a Michelin star, which was Tsuta in Tokyo. All the ramen shops that have earned a Michelin star, by the way, are all in Tokyo. And they are known for a couple of things, but they're known for their shoyu soba, which ranges from 20,000 to 30,000 yen. 20,000 is the bowl, and then 30,000 is with special ingredient. I don't know what that means exactly. Special ingredient could be extra things. Maybe it's the black truffle oil that they're known for, but I think that's in all the sauces because that's what they're known for. 2-year aged soy sauce with a black truffle oil. It's a soy sauce based broth, common in Tokyo. And 2,000 to 3,000 yen, that's about $13 to $20 is what you're looking at there. And if we take a look at this place here, we can see, look at the broth there. Mute this just in case, but you can see the glossiness of the broth. It looks higher end for some reason. You can't exactly describe why, but here's an even better picture. But it's got this sheen to it, right? That makes it look like you're in a nicer establishment. The place itself is pretty simple. It's like modern design, but it's not insanely fancy. But it's cute. And then here you can see a bowl that's got the black truffle shaved over it. I mean, that's how you get a Michelin situation. Michelin restaurants, they sure do love their truffle. And it looks awfully good. They have since lost their Michelin star, but, you know, still considered one of the most premier ramen shops in the city. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that there were 3 other locations that gained a Michelin star. And Narika, which we'll look at quickly. Narika was known for its spicy sesame ramen. We can see that here. If we scroll down, I'm not sure if this is actually the spicy sesame ramen. That looks like the spicy sesame ramen right there. This is like a bowl that's kind of got this lava lamp kind of effect to it. You can barely see the noodles, and you've got kind of a clearer broth and then what looks like chili oil on the side. And it got a star in 2017 for its spicy sesame ramen. Soba House had clam dashi. That's what it was known for. That's what the sauce was based out of. Also looks absolutely incredible. The ingredients, I will say, at the Michelin stars, they look extra fresh. Like the cuts of beef have like a redness to them and a freshness to them. And the noodles look like, I think everything just has a certain sheen to it, where it just looks like visually they're representing the quality of the ingredients. And then the one that's most interesting to me is Ginza Hachigo, which was a 6-seat ramen restaurant that combines French cuisine with ramen. And this bowl looks pristine. I mean, we're looking at this white bowl in this tiny little restaurant that's literally looks like the same size as a container, a shipping container. And everything about the bowl just looks so precise. The noodles look this kind of pale color. That the pork looks fatty. There's like this kind of booth that you sit on, and these guys prepare the ramen and then hand it over the booth to you. It just looks absolutely incredible. And they use bouillon, chicken bouillon, and duck in their recipe, in their sauce recipe, which just sounds absolutely decadente. The other thing that's super interesting, not super interesting, that's an overstatement. But what's interesting is they all lost their Michelin stars in 2024, and no ramen stars currently hold a Michelin star. So I do wonder, did they all lose a step? Did the Michelin guide have some vendetta against, giving them a star? I do wonder if there was some sort of, was that just coincidence or not? And even if it wasn't coincidence, you got to imagine that the ramen shop owners who either had the star or were in the know, they were like, huh? What's the deal with that? That's kind of, we went from 3 to 0 1 year. They kind of squinted their eyes like, what's going on here? Does the ramen lobby need to hit Michelin up with some funding? I don't know. And the last thing I looked at when it came to high-end ramen was the most expensive ramen in the world. I tried to find the most expensive ramen, and I found some expensive ramen. Oh boy, did I find some expensive ramen. In fact, I found an $1,000 ramen. Multiple articles cited this $1,000 ramen as the craziest thing. It's in this restaurant that uses Wagyu and all this crazy ingredients and gold leaf and all this stuff. And there was a USA Today, there was a Times article, there was all these little articles written about it. And then finally I read an article from a guy who actually went. I went in 2021. But he went and he asked the waiter about the $1,000 bowl. By the way, they also had a $100 bowl, which he wound up ordering, which was also used a lot of the same high-end ingredients. But then he asked about the $1,000 bowl, and in 2021, the waiter said no one had ever ordered it. And so you kind of start doing the thing where you go, how many of these like crazy things you see on Instagram, or like 2 Chainz had that show where it's like the most expensivest items, how much of them are just to say you have it? How many of these bottle girls have the $40,000 bottle of Dom Perignon that's aged 85 years just to have that as a kind of a press release item? It really does make you wonder how many of those things, just like the menu item that's a little over showmanship in its presentation, you're like, does anyone actually order the burger with the bursting cheese inside, or is that just for show? In 2021, all these articles were written about this $1,000 bowl of ramen, and no one had ever ordered it. There was also an $110 ramen from a Thai ramen store, but I couldn't track it down. I don't know if it's still open or not. I could find websites, I could find things, I could find articles about it, but I couldn't find it. What I did find when I looked at the address that I was able to find in an article about it was a sexy Italian restaurant, which I'm going to briefly take a look at. Just because it's plated so Japanese, but it's clearly Italian food, which I just think is incredible. It goes back to the old saying, if you want the best Italian food, you go to Italy. If you want something better, you go to Japan. Japan has a reputation of taking other people's cuisines and doing it with such a craftsmanship, such a precision level, that it's hard to deny its quality. But I think what the drawing I had from looking at that expensive ramen, being unable to find, hearing that someone had never ordered the $1,000 ball, not being able to really locate these, and knowing that the places that were awarded Michelin stars were charging $13 to $20 for these Michelin bowls, I think what that does, to my mind, is it cements ramen as a food that is for the people in Japan and globally. Whether you're eating instant ramen at a $4 shop in Tokyo, Hokkaido, or a Michelin star spot, or a place that formerly had one, you're going to get a reasonably priced bowl that's absolutely delicious. It's filling, and it makes you feel warm inside as the broth is itself. And all I can think about now is that I really need to eat some ramen soon, and I really need to go to Japan soon. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into ramen culture, Japan, its history. I had a fun time researching this episode, and it makes me excited for other episodes that are topics like this, where it's like kind of a cultural investigation into a certain food. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. And thanks for tuning in to the ramen episode of The David Douglas Show.